I'm going to say this sentence in two different ways. Listen to the first way. I'm learning to use English stress patterns properly and I'm not going to stop. Now the second way. I'm learning to use English stress patterns properly and I'm not going to stop. Which way was the more English way to say it? To identify this, we need to understand different patterns of stress that you could use in a language. The first pattern that you heard was what we could call constant stress pattern. In the constant stress pattern, every single word was pronounced with the same amount of stress. That means all the sounds had the same emphasis. I didn't go up or down for any words. I didn't make any longer or shorter. They all had the same emphasis on them. But in pattern 2, we had a varied stress pattern. The words in bold were the words which had stress. In this pattern, the sounds in bold are emphasised more than the sounds that are not in bold. And English is more like pattern 2. So how do you make this stress in English? Well, first of all, you need to find the stressed sounds. In the sentence we looked at, the stress sounds are in bold, like this. But why did we choose these ones? Well, stressed sounds are what we call content words. Content words are words with real meaning, words that we can see or feel or hear, that we can sense in some way, or words that we can imagine. And therefore, the stressed sounds tend to be these. First of all, we have verbs. Verbs tell us actions or states, so they have real meaning. Next, nouns. Nouns are usually something that we can sense or imagine, something that's real. Thirdly, adjectives, because adjectives tell us more about nouns, so they are connected to the nouns, so they add to the real meaning that we get when we introduce nouns. Also adverbs, because adverbs add descriptive information to the verbs or an entire sentence. And also in this example, we cannot ignore the negative words, because the negative words cover other words which can include verbs and nouns. So in this sentence, these 5 types of words are stressed. Now we know what the stressed sounds are, what do we do to make this stress? Well, there's 3 things that you need to make sure you do to make a sound stressed. You need to say the sound louder than the unstressed sounds. You also need to say them for a little bit longer than the words or sounds that don't have stress. And finally, you need to say them higher. That means higher in tone. Higher in tone means going up like this. Lower in tone means going down like this. So stress words will be higher, unstressed sounds will be lower. Secondly, you need to also find the stressed syllables. Syllables means individual sounds. Some words are made up of more than one syllable. Some words have 2, 3, 4 or more syllables. And what happens in English words is that usually only one of the syllables takes the stress. In this sentence, the syllables with stress are these. You see that where there is a word with more than one sound, the stress falls on the first syllable in this sentence. But that's not always the case. You need to learn each word one by one to find out where the stress falls. But many times the stress does fall on the first sound. So, learning, English, patterns, properly, going. Notice how I stressed the first syllable, but I didn't stress the second syllable. So we've looked at words with stress. Now we're going to look at the unstressed sounds. What do we do with these? Usually we try to weaken the unstressed sounds, and this often involves using this sound, the schwa. It's simply this, It's the most neutral basic sound you can make, and we try to use this sound to show that a sound is weakened. In this sentence, the following sounds are weakened. I'm, to, then There's the unstressed syllables in patterns and properly, and, I'm, and then to again. The words that are unstressed don't have any real meaning in themselves. And is simply a conjunction that joins two parts of the sentence together. To is a preposition. That links different words together. I'm is a collection of I and am. Am here is an auxiliary verb that simply tells us we're using the present continuous form. Learning, going. Then you have I. Now I is a pronoun. Now I does point to a person. So it points to something with real meaning. But because it's what we call a replacement word, we often don't stress it, and we don't stress it here. Now there are some sounds that don't take the weak form, even when they are unstressed. And here, in learning and English, the ing and the ish don't take the weak form. They're still unstressed, but many combinations with I in the middle don't take this weak form. So how does this affect how our sentence sounds? Well, what happens is we introduce this schwa sound in all of the weakened places, like this. I'm learning to use English stress patterns properly, and I'm not going to stop. Did you notice how this gets into all of these different sounds here? In the longer words, where we had an unstressed syllable, I'll just note that sometimes in different forms of English, the keeps the R sound afterwards. So in British English, you just say but in other forms of English, such as American English, you might say because you keep that small R sound afterwards. And one more note. If you're being really informal, you may also weaken this word here. Going to might become gonna. That's because going to is used so frequently as a future form, it almost acts as an auxiliary for the verb that comes after to simply point to the fact we're speaking about the future. It doesn't really contain real meaning of its own anymore. It simply indicates future time. So it is also possible to weaken this word in fast, informal English. There's a bit more to this, so keep watching my videos. Or if you can't wait, try my course. It covers all there is to know about stressing words in English and more. It's called Advanced English Speaking and Pronunciation. There's a link in the description below. Or another video will appear in a moment on your screen. Click on that to go and see more of my content.